Welcome back to the 360 Sports Network. I'm Greg, the mad scientist, Fischero, and with me tonight is James, the value man, Dodson. And there's a long story as to how he got the value moniker. If you tune into the Greenwood Hubbard Chevrolet show, you'll hear little bits and pieces of that. But we're going to talk tonight about running backs and the top tiers, the fantasy sleepers, and the value backs. James, how you doing out there tonight?
I'm making everybody's draft more valuable with our insight tonight, Mr. Mad Scientist. That's the way we work here at 3SM. We're making it better for you, and I'm ready to roll. I'm ready to talk some running backs for us.
Yeah, James is the value man, and check out our customizable cheat sheets. They have tremendous value.
It's all about the value, and there's no numbers never lie. It's all about the numbers. It's all about the value, and you get the best value when you use cheat sheets that are made just for your league, and that's what we got for you at 360sportsnetwork.com. So check them out, because that's the best way that you're going to dominate your league, is when you have cheat sheets made for you.
Without a doubt. All right, James, let's break it down. Who do you believe are the top tier running backs this year?
Well, again, running backs especially, in my mind, is the most important position for knowing your scoring system. And that's mainly because of the PPR leagues, whether you get points for a reception in a league. Most standard leagues do not give a point for a reception. Some give a half a point. Some won't even give a whole point. So you got to look and see which running backs are going to get you the most catches out of the backfield. Because if you have a guy who's running for over 1,000 yards but also catching 80 or 90 passes, which a couple of our top guys are close to those numbers, then you definitely need to look at that. And as a result, especially if it's a PPR league, and honestly, even if it's not, I have Ray Rice as the top of the class this year. Last year, when he had 290 rushing attempts, over 1,300 yards, 12 rushing touchdowns, as many last year as he did in his 2 prior years combined. But also, when he catches 3 touchdowns out of the backfield, is also really big for me as well. I looked for him to do very similar numbers, about 1,300 rushing yards, 10 to 12, maybe even 14 total touchdowns. But here's the kicker. 80 receptions I'm projecting for him this year. That's a lot of points, especially in a PPR league. And he lost a lot of touches last year from guys like Willis McGahee. Well, there is no Willis McGahee there anymore, just a rookie running back behind him. So Ray Rice is going to get your touches.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you on that. And when I saw 76 receptions for 704 yards, that in itself speaks volumes, especially when you have a guy back there like Joe Flacco, who is sort of an early version of a guy that we all once knew and loved, called Brett Favre.
Yes, and it's very easy, and that's the way the Baltimore system works. They want to get Ray Rice touches, whether it is running it or just catching those little swing passes, and they are very good at the screen game. They'll give him, I think 80 receptions might even be a bit low on the projections, because he's going to be in the game so much.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, who else do you have?
Arian Foster and LaShawn McCoy are 2 and 2A, I guess you could call them. I know we've used that moniker a lot before. Arian Foster is probably the safer pick of the two, I think, just from consistency standpoint. Last 2 years, even when he missed 3 games last year, he still put up over 1,200 yards both years, 16 touchdowns in 2010, 10 touchdowns last year, and again, averaging 60 catches, 60 catches, 600 receiving yards, 2 receiving touchdowns each year, coming out of the backfield as well. I say he's a little bit safer because of consistency. LaShawn McCoy, you might be tempted because he ran for 1,300 yards and 17 touchdowns last year. But you go back 1 year prior to that, where he touched it 70 less times, and he rushed for 300 less yards, and he rushed for 10 fewer touchdowns. Which LaShawn McCoy are we going to see? I'd like to say we're going to see the touchdowns out of him, but I cannot say that for sure, and that just scares me.
Yeah, you know what, though, when you mention Arian Foster, the word handcuffs comes right into play. Because if you're going to draft Arian Foster that high, you definitely want to handcuff him to Ben Tate, because Arian Foster does have a slight propensity of getting injured. And Ben Tate was, as we saw last year, was a more than worthy replacement for Arian.
Well, even when they're both healthy, they're both getting enough touches. So even if you don't have the number 1 or 2 pick to get Arian Foster, there's no reason not to pick Ben Tate later on in your draft.
Oh, no doubt about it. He's definitely a very strong tier 4 type running back if you want to go that low with him. So I have to agree with you about LeSean McCoy. I think LeSean McCoy is probably the stronger of the two. Only because of the fact that he doesn't have a Ben Tate behind him, but he's going to be carrying pretty much the bulk of the workload. However, LeSean McCoy does have a tendency to get himself nicked up a little bit, and that's something we got to be careful with there.
And another thing going along with the issues that you got to worry about with your scoring system. Again, PPR is a heavy favorite towards Arian Foster when you compare these two, but if your league heavily criticizes against the turnovers, Arian Foster has had 6 turnovers in the last 3 years. LeSean McCoy, half of that, only 3. So you know you're going to get a lot of turnovers coming out of Arian Foster, where LeSean McCoy, you might be safer in that route. So again, as we say time and time again, know your system.
Right. And if you're drafting in the top 3 or 4 in your draft order itself, you can't go wrong with choosing either Foster or McCoy, or Rice for that matter, because all 3 of them, I believe, have equal weight as far as being a tier 1 running back itself. Moving along from tier 1 to, I could probably safely say we're pretty much through talking about tier 1 running backs at this particular time frame. Who would you say would be tier 1.5 or maybe tier 2 potential?
I would definitely say this guy is a tier 1.5, almost in a tier 1. First 3 guys we have, they better go 1, 2, 3 in your draft unless you're very heavy on the passing yards and touchdowns. Rice, Foster, McCoy, they got to go 1, 2, 3. Maurice Jones-Drew has to be the number 4 running back coming off the board. And that's because, well, really, he's the only threat that Jacksonville has right now. He had 343 rushes last year, 1,600 yards. The lack of touchdowns out of such a premier back is scary, but if my numbers were correct looking earlier, he had half of the team's touchdowns at the halfway point in the year last year.
I would have to agree with you on that with Jones-Drew. However, there's a couple caveats that come into play with Jones-Drew. Number 1, he gets hit an awful lot. And unless Blaine Gabbert can keep the defenses honest right now, I am not 100% sold that Jones-Drew can actually hold up for another season of pounding. Granted, he got stronger last year as the season wore on, and he got more than 100 yards in each of the team's last 3 games. But this guy is getting older, and he's taking a beating. So I would be very careful looking at Jones-Drew perhaps going that high.
Well, he missed 2 games in 2010. He had a troubled knee at the end of the season and missed a couple games. He came back, everybody was worried about it, and he came and had a career season, did not miss a game. I'm not worried about injuries. Yes, he's going to take a beating, but he's the one, no matter how small he is, and yeah, he's only 5'7", he is the guy who gives out the punishing. He doesn't take it. I'm not worried personally about the injury concern.
Yeah, he's like trying to tackle a bowling ball. It's a little tough.
I can't say I've tried that, Greg.
No, well, it's part of my madness.
I'll try it someday, I guess.
No, it's not advisable. Injuries can result.
Not if you're Maurice Jones-Drew.
That's true. Who else do you have there?
Another guy right on the edge, I think, is Matt Forte. And now that he's signed his long-term deal, we know he's playing for sure. I project him to just keep increasing in the touches, especially on the ground. He is the one and only guy that I trust getting carries in Chicago right now. And again, another guy who is going to be consistent in those touches, get your catches out of the backfield. last year only in 12 games, he still put up 52 catches for 490 yards. When he plays a full season, I can see him easily getting 60-plus catches again, a couple touchdowns in the air, and I think you see his rushing touchdowns go up because that's what scares people off. He only had 3 rushing touchdowns last year, 6 the year before that. I think those numbers have nowhere to go but up. I don't think you should be worrying about that.
Oh, I don't know if I'm drinking the Forte Kool-Aid right now. I actually had Darren Sproles ranked a little bit higher, quite a bit higher than Matt Forte. One thing that concerns me a little bit about Matt Forte is the guy that's knocking on his door, Michael Bush. Do you think Michael Bush is going to have a factor in the number of touches that Forte is going to have?
I definitely think it'll have a bit of a factor, but I'll tell you what. Last year, a reason that Forte struggled in the big number where it came to touchdowns was because you had a bruising back in Marion Barber behind him who was getting those touchdowns. Michael Bush is not as much of a goal line threat. Yes, I'll probably still use him in that same position, but I personally don't see Michael Bush taking away as many other touches as well, because really Marion Barber could do a lot more than Michael Bush does. So I think that a guy knocking on his doorstep, I think that was more of a threat last year.
Interesting. Well, my tier 1.5 shapes up to be a little bit different. Yeah, I would say Maurice Jones-Drew is probably a very high tier 2 pick. I would have to agree with you on some of that stuff. However, if you note my concerns with Blaine Gabbert, that's the thing that's kind of holding me back from this guy basically taking off, so to speak. But I am absolutely in love with Darren Sproles. This guy, if you're in a PPR league, you really have to take a look at this. He had 86 receptions last year for 710 receiving yards. 87 rushing attempts for 603 yards. Now, he's not he's not a 1,000-yard back because there's too many running backs down there in New Orleans. But Drew Brees loves to spread that ball around. I mean, if anybody spreads that ball around like Peyton Manning did in Indianapolis, it's Drew Brees. And this is a guy that he almost is like a tight end the way he's featured down there. And just tons of receiving yards. So that's why I put Darren Sproles sort of in that tier 1.5 area itself. But another guy that I would really rank quite highly, and this was one that I kind of picked early on last year, if you were listening to my shows on WBBW, I was real high in DeMarco Murray for most of the season. And DeMarco Murray, I think, is going to have an incredible campaign this year coming up. He's recovered from his Week 14 injury where he broke his ankle. But you look at his yards that he put together in his rookie campaign last year, and also the fact that the Cowboys are a very motivated team, and Felix Jones right now is no threat to overtake Murray. I think Murray's, he's the man down there, so to speak, and I see DeMarco Murray having tremendous numbers. The
only thing that worries me about DeMarco Murray, though, he was injury prone at Oklahoma. He came in and he had another injury in the NFL. I'm still not completely sure that he's over it. This is another guy I would handcuff Felix Jones, especially when the backup is such a huge playmaker and can get you the really big point games. Even when he's not starting, he can come in for a screen pass, go 80 yards for a touchdown. Does that mean you start him? No, but as soon as an injury comes out, you better have Felix Jones on your team if you have Murray as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the problems that we're having right now when we're taking a look at all these running backs is that there's a whole bunch of big names out here that have tremendous upsides and tremendous downsides. And if you're wondering why I'm using this in reference, just listen to the name I'm going to bring up and you'll understand why. Chris Johnson. Chris Johnson is probably the most difficult player to get an accurate fantasy read on. When you take a look at his level of work that he did back in 2009, he was the 2K guy, CJ 2K, 2,006 yards rushing. He had 50 receptions for 503 yards. Of course, that was back when Vince Young was playing for the Titans. Now we're taking a look here in 2011. He had 262 attempts for 1,047 yards rushing, and he had 57 receptions for 418 yards receiving, but only 4 touchdowns. PPR, he could probably pay off for you, okay. But how do you read Chris Johnson? Do you see him as a high tier 2 guy, or do you see him as maybe somewhat of a bust this year?
I still got to keep him high tier 2. There's no way I can let someone this talented, even though he has burned me the last 2 years quite badly, there's no way you can let this guy slip too far. Especially, yes, PPR League is what will keep him ahead of someone like a Matt Forte and guys like, say, Jamal Charles, even a Ryan Matthews or Darren McFadden. I think that he's just still too good of a guy to be letting go. And you're going to have a better year this year for the entire offense now that Locker is going to supposedly take over the system for good. You're going to have a much more balanced offense. Chris Johnson is going to return to his normal self, well, at least closer to it. Will he reach CJ2K status again? Absolutely not. You can't expect that, but I still think that this guy is too good to pass up end of the first round, beginning of the second round. Yeah, I would put him top of tier 2.
That's interesting. Now, another name that's been kind of devoid here for the past 5 to 7 minutes that we've been talking, Adrian Peterson. Boy, what a fall from the top he's had.
It's disappointing. Such a great guy, and but besides the injury concerns, I mean, coming off of the injury, off of the ACL tear, how good is he going to be? There's no way that you can predict that. He could, legitimately, without much doubt, he could come out and be the #1 fantasy running back this year.
There's always potential. I mean, there's potential that Chris Johnson can get 2,000 yards again, too.
Exactly, there is. But Johnson, at least, is a safer pick that he's not going to go and do what Peterson possibly could do, play only 5 games because of a bad knee, and just not be himself. An ACL tear is, I mean, I don't care how good some of these guys coming back have been, there is still too big of a risk for his first year back. We haven't seen him on the field yet. We've only seen him in limited workouts in a weight room. I don't trust it yet, especially for a running back who has to make those cuts. You also got to remember, Peterson's 27. He's getting to be a pretty old guy for a running back in the modern NFL.
Yeah, and he's also making the headlines off the field, too, which is not a good sign.
No, well, here's a good thing, at least, that comes out of that. Allegedly, it took 3 officers to arrest him down at a club down in Houston, I believe it was. The only good part about this, apparently, he's shrugging off officers like he used to shrug off tacklers on the field. So maybe that's a good thing that he still has the power to break tackles. Maybe.
Oh boy. I don't know.
No, that's a terrible thing to say, but I've heard that joke too many times. I had to pass along myself.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, we're hearing the big names. Also, some new names out there though that are possibly going to make a big start into the NFL this year. Trent Richardson, he's going to be the workhorse down there in Cleveland. Where do you put him? Is he tier 2?
He would be. I think because he's unproven right now. All we have to look at is his body of work from college. But I would say that he would be, I'd say, high-level tier 2 at this particular time frame, only because Cleveland really doesn't have anything else. I would expect numbers similar to what Adrian Peterson put up in his first couple of years when he was at Minnesota, because the two teams, the Browns and the Vikings, were kind of similar teams. When Adrian Peterson was over there at the Vikings, well, he's still at the Vikings, but in his first couple of years at the Vikings, I would expect Trent Richardson to put up Adrian Peterson-esque type numbers. So don't be surprised. And I would actually draft Trent Richardson probably, and I'm being the mad scientist here now, I would draft him low first round, perhaps high second round.
That's a lot higher than I'm seeing him go, and I'm glad you say that because I really think he could be that potential. Because he's a rookie, because like you said, he's unproven, we don't know about him. A lot of people are dropping back on him. And because of that, I've seen this guy, I've picked him up in mock drafts as late as the 4th and 5th round. I don't think he'll go that far. Again, PPR, if you're in a PPR league, his value drops a little bit, but the guy is able to squat or bend or leg press over 850 pounds. This guy's a tank. You don't have to worry about, like most rookies, him missing time. I don't think you got to worry about that. I think he's about as solid as of a rookie draft as can be, and honestly, probably one of the safest in terms of upside and downside for running backs when there's such a huge injury and backups threat in the running back game this year.
Also, you have to remember a couple other things, too. Our friends up north have solidified their offensive line. Their the blind side has been pretty much taken care of. Trent Richardson's not going to be a blocking back. He's going to be basically your every down back. And depending upon who's out there, it's going to be Colt McCoy, it's going to be Brandon Weeden. This guy is going to be the hallmark or the pretty much the central feature, similar to, I think, the way Jerome Bettis perhaps was with Pittsburgh there for a while.
Except that Jerome Bettis could not run the Wildcat like I bet you'll see Trent Richardson run for a while this year.
Right, but I mean, I'm saying is he's going to be your everyday, every down type guy. He's going to be in the mix, and he's going to be a load, and he's going to wear people out.
I agree. I think a second-round pick is not out of the question for Richardson to be taken, PPR league or not.
Yeah.
A couple other big names we're leaving out of the conversation here. Darren McFadden, Marshawn Lynch, Ryan Matthews, all guys that you see for most people you're looking as a top 10 running back. Are you sold on all three of those guys being a top 10 running back, tier 2, or do they drop out into the tier 3 range?
Well, Marshawn Lynch definitely is a tier 2 running back, only because of the body of work that he put up last year. However, there's some definite concerns about Marshawn Lynch. I mean, once again, he made some headlines off the field, which, doesn't bode well. And depending upon what our good commish, Roger Goodell, does, could Marshawn Lynch have some time off? I'm not sure.
We can say that about a lot of players. I mean, Lynch, we'll talk about Dez Bryant later. Dion Lewis got in trouble out in Philadelphia. Adrian Peterson we mentioned already. There's so many issues that hopefully you have a late draft that you can see, do we know of any suspensions? Because, yes, that can severely affect a Peterson or a Lynch draft value based on where this is going to happen. As I did a mock draft literally the day before the Lynch incident and a day after. Lynch was drafted in round 2 the day before. He wasn't drafted until round 5 the day after. Now it's just in a mock draft.
Yeah. So, that's the big thing you have to take a look at on this. The other thing about Marshawn Lynch, too, is the team that he plays on. Seattle is a big fish in a small pond. Let's just put it that way. They beat up on a lot of teams last year that had average defenses at best. So, with that said, this is a guy that basically had 102.7 rushing yards average in 7 games, but they were against maybe teams that were a bit lackluster. So we'll see how this pans out. I think he's definitely somebody to be in a tier 2, somebody to take a look at, but it could be a bit of a gamble as far as I'm concerned. Darren McFadden, I think, was another name you mentioned. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
I like D-Mac. But speaking about gambling, boy, oh boy, it's tough. His 2011 season was cut short by a Lisfranc sprain. But, back in May, scouts out there were saying, well, the guy can cut. I mean, he's running, he's cutting, he's looking good, he's healthy. With Michael Bush gone out there in Oakland, this guy is the main man. He's the centerpiece. But he's still playing for Oakland, which, it's like the caveat, like the Lisfranc sprain. I would say he's a solid tier 2 guy right now. With Carson Palmer, if Carson Palmer gets in gear, this guy does have some hands. Back in the 2010 season, he had 47 receptions for 507 yards. This guy could be a PPR guy, provided that Carson Palmer gets in gear and makes things happen out there.
I will almost put Darren McFadden up into tier 1.5, despite the injury concerns. One reason for that, Michael Bush is gone. There's really nobody of any threat behind him to take carries. Mike Goodson, I'm sorry, he's not going to perform as a guy who's going to steal a lot of touches from Darren McFadden. Not even close. The other reason, offensive coordinator Greg Knapp, last 2 seasons that he was in Oakland, he produced top 10 rush offenses. You're going to see a lot more touches from McFadden. You're going to see him still getting the catches out of the backfield. Yeah, there's injury risks, and that's always something you're going to have to worry about. I will say, Darren McFadden probably will miss a game for you this year, but the upside is that he's only going to increase. There's nobody else around there. He's one of the few guys that I can honestly say, out of everybody we've mentioned so far, that there is no true backup risk. And in running backs, that's a real big thing this year because so many teams use 2 or even 3 running backs on a rotation.
Well, you're talking about running backs, 2 or 3 running backs in rotation. You also have to take a look at Ryan Matthews. This is a guy that basically had a breakout season in 2011, and looking at what's going on over there in San Diego, Ryan Matthews could have a huge year next year.
Yeah, he's another guy that, I mean, I've never really been a Matthews fan, but again, there's no one behind him. LaRon McClain is the number 2 guy in terms of projected stats at the running back position. If Matthews can stay healthy, which I don't know if there's really any reason to worry about it too much. He did miss 2 games last year, so you got to be concerned. But again, nobody behind him, you can't be worried too much about it.
Yeah, plus this guy had a lot of yak. 50 receptions for 455 yards. Granted, he only had 6 touchdowns last year, but his rushing, he had over 1,000 yards rushing, 1,091 yards rushing. So
this is another perfect time to mention it, Greg. If you're heavy on the rushing yards but not as much on the TDs, that's what you want to look for. And again, go to our customized cheat sheet so you can type that all in, and you don't have to worry about looking at every single stat. We'll do it for you.
Yeah, Ryan Matthews is kind of the type of guy, if you want to get into sort of the mindset of how I draft and how I work things out, I will take a whole bunch of guys that will put up some nice-looking rushing numbers and not really worry about the touchdowns, because I believe the touchdowns will take care of themselves. But if you can have 2 or 3 featured running backs, well over 1,000 yards rushing, you know, your touchdowns will take care of themselves, especially if your league rewards you nicely for yards rushing and yak, of course.
Well, you do say touchdowns take care of themselves. Yes, every once in a while you will have a Chris Johnson who will only get 4 touchdowns in a season, but that is a big-time rarity.
Yeah, exactly, right. I mean, you will. It's a 90%. It's not tried and proven as a theorem per se, but it does work. How about some sleepers? Round 3 guys, round 4 guys. Who are some of your sleepers that you're seeing out there?
One of the biggest guys that I see as a sleeper that really it's, again, because of injury, he played almost all of last year as a backup. He did not start a game until the playoffs. Isaac Redman. Rashard Mendenhall tore his ACL at the end of the year, which means it is very unlikely that he will be back right at the start of the season. Keep your ears open for it. If Mendenhall is supposed to be back and is going to start for sure, then Redman needs to drop back. But I don't think there's a chance at all that Mendenhall can be back until halfway through the season at best. I think Isaac Redman is a better running back than Rashard Mendenhall. I think Isaac Redman can do everything for you. He's been just the red zone Redman goal line back. He is not. He is a lot more than that. He's catching passes out of the backfield. He's showing bursts out of the backfield. There were at least 5 games last year, I remember specifically, where he had a bigger yards per attempt average than the starter, the supposed faster, more reliable guy in Rashard Mendenhall. I love Isaac Redman. He's going to be available for you probably 3rd to 4th round. He is someone that I think is a must-have, especially if you decide to draft wide receiver early.
I would have to agree with that. I really like Isaac Redman only because of Todd Haley's influence right now in the with his infusion of the running game. Take a look and see what Jamal Charles did over in Kansas City. Look what Isaac Redman can do right now. Mendenhall is definitely probably one of the biggest busts right now. I never did like Mendenhall's style to begin with. I thought that he was, he was a hard runner there, and he got a lot of yards last year. But his style just wasn't as punishing as some of the other running backs that, like a Ray Rice, for instance.
Especially for his size.
Exactly. His size is comparable to that of a Ray Rice. And when you put him up against Ray Rice would win every single time. But it's a different system in Pittsburgh. And with the emphasis on the short pass right now and the emphasis on getting the ball out of Roethlisberger's hands and getting it more toward playmakers, Isaac Redman is certainly a playmaker. And I really think that he's going to have a breakout season this year.
Well, to prove it to you, Greg, Pro Football Focus rated Isaac Redman as the league's 14th best halfback in 2011, and that was when he didn't start a game in 2011. That's ahead of guys like Ryan Matthews, Michael Turner, Darren McFadden, Marshawn Lynch. That should tell you a lot right there.
It does. It does. A couple other guys I'm really, really high on right now are the law firm, Ben Jarvis Green Ellis, over in Cincinnati. He was basically part of the committee up there in New England, but he is now the main man over at Cincinnati. This is a guy that is a big guy. He's going to put the punishment on a lot of those teams out there in the AFC North.
Yeah, you're right. Cedric Benson goes out, Green Ellis still gets in, but you got to still worry about someone like Bernard Scott, who's going to get you all the third down carries and catches because he's definitely more versatile. Yeah, but it's the touchdowns that will help, especially in the Cincinnati game.
Right. Another guy that I really like is Ben Jarvis Green Ellis's replacement in New England, which is Stephon Ridley. Stephon Ridley, he showed a lot of promise last year. He had a season-high 97 rushing yards against Oakland. Fumbles are a big problem with Ridley, though. But I think if he gets a grip on the ball, this is a guy that I really believe is going to rack up some nice numbers. And that's one of the reasons why I really believe that Ben Jarvis Green Ellis was expendable up there.
And I'm going to disagree for the first time really in this podcast today with you. I do not believe Ridley is a smart pick at any point in this draft because I think you're going to see one of the main rushers this year out of New England, not a running back. I think you're going to see a lot of formations this year with Aaron Hernandez in the backfield because they just have so many weapons in their receiving and tight end core that they are going to need to get both Gronkowski and Hernandez and possibly a third tight end on the field at once. And that puts Hernandez as a running back. He is going to get his carries like he did in the playoffs. Hernandez had 81 yards rushing in the playoffs last year in one game. I think that Ridley, just like Green Ellis, is expendable.
You do make a valid point, and that is something that is worth considering. However, if you downplay Ridley's contributions, you're putting the Patriots more as a one-dimensional passing team, rather than as a balanced team. It all depends on what Ridley does. If Ridley proves that he's got fumbleitis like he did part of the season last year, Ridley will disappear just as quickly as Randy Moss disappeared up there.
No, exactly.
But, this is a big but. And this is one of the reasons why, we have the sleepers out there, and he's a sleeper. If he can put on a little bit of a show, Belichick has been known to keep the guys who are playing hot continuing to play hot. So we shall see what we shall find.
Don't forget, you also got Danny Woodhead up there, though, too. Don't forget that.
Yes. Another guy that's a sleeper, Donald Brown for the Colts. This guy, the former first rounder, had a bit of a mini breakout year last year. This is a guy that, with the new system, he's going to be the feature back. With Andrew Luck out there, I think they're going to go back to more of a traditional system, unlike the system that they had when Peyton Manning had Joe Adai.
They definitely need to go back to a traditional system, and Donald Brown is a very good guy to bring into that system. I mean, he's used to rushing 30 or 40 times back from the Connecticut days, so you don't need to worry about workload or anything like that now that he's a feature back. I think Donald Brown is a high upside guy that you can get as late as the 6th or 7th round.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And speaking about high upside people that you can get mid-6th or 7th round, Willis McGahee is another one. I have a note here, compared to Joe Adai. With the system that Peyton Manning is going to be instilling over there, I would see McGahee having his yak go up tremendously.
And again, you still got to worry. I mean, Denver, they don't have they don't have the Shanahan offense where they go running back by committee, but you still have a rookie Ronnie Hillman. You still got Moreno. You still got Lance Ball that could possibly take away carries and catches. But like you said, the comparisons to Adai are just almost creepy, especially when you got the big gun in Peyton Manning coming in to cut that meat.
Yeah, and you're going to see an Indy-style offense. It's going to be interesting how they talk about West Coast offenses. You're going to now see what's called an Indy-style offense, especially if Peyton Manning continues to be successful after coming back from his injury.
And McGahee has proven he can catch passes out of the backfield. There's no, I mean, he hasn't gotten the big numbers because, well, he hasn't had the greatest situations to be able to do it. However, when you have someone like Peyton Manning where that's his job, you're going to get a lot of it.
Exactly.
Another one, I've never been so high on rookie running backs, but I have another rookie here that I think can make big splashes right away. Doug Martin, he's been drawing Ray Rice comparisons back from draft day. And Ray Rice's former coach, now at Tampa Bay, Greg Schiano, has already said he is a three-down back and that he's going to be in there right away. LeGarrette Blount's days are over. I think Doug Martin has this job from the beginning, and I see a 1,000-yard rushing year out of him.
You know what? I would have to agree with you on that as well. LeGarrette Blount squandered a tremendous opportunity that he had last year. And I think that whole entire team squandered their opportunity to become great. I mean, you had a whole bunch of talented superstars on there, from LeGarrette Blount all the way through to their receivers and their quarterback, and it seemed like everybody from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers ended up on milk cartons for some reason or another. They just disappeared.
And Schiano came right in, and he criticized Blount's fumbles. He had 3 fumbles lost in 2010 and 3 again in 2011. He's a short yardage back at best because I think, like I said before, it is Martin's backfield.
Yeah. Doug Martin, you're going to see some big things. This guy coming out of Boise State, I would say, if I were to draft him on my fantasy team, I would definitely say third round, probably on the high end on the third round, low end probably 5th or 6th.
Now, Greg, this is a good time to talk about it, I think, because some of these, I mean, where I'm saying that I've seen Doug Martin drop 7th round for sure. You're saying you would pick him in the 3rd round. A lot of this depends on your league setup, first of all, but also just based on your general drafting strategy. What is, especially for running backs, the most important position in fantasy football, what is a good strategy to have in terms of drafting a running back? And that can be based off of your draft position or just based off your strategy or anything. What do you like to do?
Well, I've been often criticized for my style. Of course, I ride the waiver wire very, very hard if I don't draft the way I would like to draft. Let's put it that way. But I believe in high risk, high reward. Who's going to get you the yards? The running back. Who's going to get you the touchdowns? The running back. So in previous years, in years that I've won or have come close to winning, I usually go first 4 to 5 rounds, running back, running back, running back, running back, running back. Only because of the fact that I can get myself a fairly decent quarterback in the 5th or 6th round. Got Eli Manning last year, pretty deep. But once again, running backs have a propensity of getting injured, getting nicked up. So and the other thing too is you want to take these value players off the board, so players like yourself don't grab them.
What, you don't want me to take your players, Greg?
Heck no.
Well, and you kind of mentioned it there. You've gotten Eli Manning really late. We mentioned it in our quarterbacks podcast, but there are a bunch of guys who are all very equal at the 8 through 13 quarterback position. You got anywhere from Mike Vick, Ben Roethlisberger, Peyton Manning even, Matt Ryan, Matt Schaub, Jay Cutler normally available in the 10th, 11th round, Andy Dalton, Alex Smith. So many of those guys who I would gladly have as my starting quarterback in fantasy football. I can use, those first 4 or 5 picks on a running back. I still, though, have to go with value. And if, say, the first 4 or 5 guys we've mentioned have gone off the board, yes, a Calvin Johnson looks very intriguing at the end of a first round.
Oh, yeah.
But if you do decide to go that route, taking a wide receiver or a quarterback, then you better be getting your running backs second, third, fourth round. I did a mock draft yesterday where it's good to test things out and see how they work, and that's why, you play around with things. I drafted Calvin Johnson. Second round, I got Gronkowski. Third round, the next best option in my value picks was Wes Welker. But because I had waited through the first 2 rounds to get everybody, the best running back who was available at the beginning of round 3 when I came back around again was Ben Jarvis Green Ellis. And with 21 running backs who had already gone at that point, now I'm in deep trouble because my number 2 running back was C.J. Spiller by the time it came to me again.
Yeah.
So that's why you need to try to take those 4 or 5 running backs. Well, be conservative, take at least 3 quickly, I would say. But, again, it depends on where you are.
A lot of it also depends upon where you draft as well. If you're in a 12-man league and you draft in the top 3, you can afford the strategy. If you draft in the bottom 3, you can afford the strategy. If you're in the middle, you have to watch and see who your top 3 and bottom 3 are drafting, because you might be able to employ the strategy depending upon if you get people that are just, it's all very important to have a plan and to stick with the plan. Let's just put it that way.
Yes, and I think if you have one of the top 3-4 picks in a standard league, you got to get one of the running backs first. If you're in the middle one, then you consider getting a quarterback to start. If you're in the bottom half of the first round, then you can look either our tier 1.5 running backs come around for maybe a second running back, or then you consider, do I go Calvin Johnson and come around with a running back? It all depends on your draft spot.
In a couple scenarios that I kind of play around with from time to time, if you draft an Arian Foster in your first round, your second round you can expect to find somebody like a Matt Forte or a D-Mac, or even an Ahmed Bradshaw. And then your third round, you're now looking at somebody, perhaps an Adrian Peterson, perhaps an Isaac Redman, perhaps a Doug Martin. I would actually start looking to see who the quarterbacks are on the board as well, to see if there's a big-name quarterback that has been taken early, that you might be able to get more value out of that as well. But it's conceivable that by going on a running back heavy strategy, you can get a Foster, a Forte, or a D-Mac, and a Bradshaw, and to have a stable of running backs like that after your 4th round, that's pretty impressive.
Exactly, and when you get out of the top 20 running backs, which is to say you're talking probably the first 3 rounds worth of drafting, you're down to guys like Mark Ingram, Jonathan Stewart, Roy Halou in a Shanahan offense, Sean Green, Javid Best. If you get down in the 20 pluses in wide receivers, you still got some, I don't know, do you recognize any of these names, Greg? You still got Brandon Lloyd, you still got Percy Harvin, you still got Dwayne Bowe, you still got Deshaun Jackson and Stevie Johnson, Demarius Thomas, Torrey Smith, Antonio Brown. There's a lot more depth at the wide receiver position than there is at running back.
Exactly. Now, and this is kind of interesting because in previous years it was you had more depth at running back than you had at wide receiver. But this is why it's so very important to take a look at where your backs are because, let's face it, fantasy football has always been traditionally a running back centered game. And if you stick with the strategy with running backs, you can't go too far wrong.
No, you will be safe at least that way because again, it goes by value, and the difference between the top running backs versus someone who is not going to be starting, you're talking about 180-point delta versus a wide receiver, Calvin Johnson at 170, the next highest, 120. There's a lot more value for a top running back than there is for a top wideout.
There you go.
There's your value, guys. You knew you'd be hearing it from me.
And yes, you did get a rare moment of strategy from the mad scientist. Well, it's always been commonly known anyway. But anyway, so anybody else out there that tickles your fancy right now, running back-wise?
I'm really thinking that Peyton Hillis is going to have a good year this year. Yes, he's a backup. I definitely think that he is probably the best handcuff possibility in the draft this year, going along with Jamal Charles out there in Kansas City. I just don't see Jamal Charles coming back after a bad early incident. I think they're going to split time, and I think Peyton Hillis is going to be getting a lot of goal line touches this year. He's someone to keep your eye on in the late draft rounds, without much doubt at all. Toby Gerhart as well, for the exact same reasons. Plus, you also have to add in now the legal concerns from Adrian Peterson out there.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it here. Kevin Smith, I think, also has a little bit of value too. When you're taking a look at Jahvid Best, Kevin Smith, you may want to consider handcuffing him if you do indeed draft Jahvid Best.
Oh. Yeah, you also got to look at Mikel LeSure then too, I think. That's
true. Well, that just about wraps it up for our running backs. Any parting thoughts?
One final thing that I think we need to look at, and it's very rare, but we got to consider it. Do your position players get points for the kick and punt returns? If so, someone like Dexter McCluster becomes a really high pick. Jamie Harper as well. Even when you look at someone like Dion Lewis, who is the number 2 out in Philadelphia, but is going to be returning everything under the sun. So that's just another thing. Keep your eye on. Because the return yards and return touchdowns can be a real big point getter, especially for some of these late guys that, honestly, we forget about.
You know what? That's an excellent point you bring up there, too. Know your league and know what your league is going to be providing. A lot of people don't take that opportunity to sit down and to take a look at the scoring structure because, it's just all a fine print. I just want to play and I want to get points. But if you take your time, read the fine print, know what the league is doing, what points they give you, what points you don't get. It can mean all the difference in the world, especially utilizing customizable cheat sheets. This thing will actually, a Dexter McCluster could actually be a steal if you're in a league that rewards you for punt returns.
Even Darren Sproles, who will go back occasionally and get returns, that insanely jumps up his average, even if he returns one kick or punt every game.
Exactly. So, know your league, know what you're doing, take the time to read the fine print, and don't be afraid to take some risks.
And don't forget to keep on coming back here to check in for all of the injury concerns, legal concerns especially, because, well, like we've said before, you never know what's going to happen. You got to make sure you know your league and you know the league, as in the National Football League, what's going on out there, because honestly, anything's possible at this point.
If Roger Goodell, well, let's put it this way. If he remains consistent and decides to take the high road like he did against Ben Roethlisberger, you can expect to see Marshawn Lynch getting a 4-game suspension, Adrian Peterson perhaps getting a 2 to 4 game suspension, as well as a whole other, host of players. And that in itself is going to make a lot of the difference as far as where things are going as well, because there's been a lot of player infractions this year, more so than in previous years.
And when that sort of thing happens, then you can look at a guy like Robert Turbin in Seattle, and he might be now worth, instead of being completely off of the radar for sure, just a power back who might get goal line carries. Now, all of a sudden, he might be thrust into the starting position. So, again, could be worth a late-round pick if you know that Lynch is going to be suspended.
Well, that wraps it up for a running back edition. Please Twitter or send us any of your comments, concerns. If you think I'm completely wet and out of my mind, well, yes, I am wet and out of my mind because it's raining. But nonetheless, we are going to be talking about wide receivers next time on this next round of sound coming up.
And again, one last time, we can say so much in one of these podcasts, but we want to help your individual team. So send us your personal questions, your specific questions, so that we can answer them and, you know, make your personal team as good as it can. We can give you general advice, but if you ask us about your league specifically, we can answer it.
Yep, no doubt about it. Feel free to catch any of our live promo spots, and we hope to be talking to you all maybe more or less more regularly in the future.